I found out my ex was still stalking me years after we broke up. How I finally confronted the situation and took control of my life changed everything forever. The past has a way of creeping back into your life when you least expect it. I thought I had moved on, thought I was finally free from the nightmare that had haunted me for years. But as it often goes, the past doesn't just fade away. It lingers like a shadow that refuses to leave, waiting for the perfect moment to resurface. My ex James and I had a turbulent relationship. When we were together, it felt like we were always caught in a whirlwind of highs and lows, filled with passion, jealousy, and explosive arguments. The love we shared was fiery, but it was toxic, and I knew it. We broke up several years ago, and at the time I thought I was rid of him for good. I moved cities, started fresh, built a new life, one that didn't include the drama or the emotional roller coaster that came with him. It felt like I had finally taken control of my life, free from the past that had nearly broken me. But one day, I received a message that made my blood run cold. It was an innocuous message at first, coming from an unknown number. "I miss you. We need to talk. I haven't been the same without you." The message was short, and at first I didn't recognize the number. But as soon as I read the words, my heart stopped. That tone, the words, it was James. I didn't need to see the number again to know who it was. I didn't respond at first. I thought it might just be a mistake, some random text meant for someone else. Maybe it was a wrong number, or maybe someone was playing a sick joke. But when I saw another message the next day, the one that followed immediately after, my stomach twisted in knots. This time, he didn't hold back. "Don't pretend you don't know who this is. I've been following you, watching you. I know where you work, where you live. We can still be together, just say the word." That's when I realized it wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. It was James, and he wasn't just reaching out to rekindle some relationship. He was stalking me. The fear crept in slowly, but by the time I had processed the gravity of the situation, I was already trapped in his web again. He had already found me, and now, it was only a matter of time before he showed up. I had left everything behind to escape him, but he had found me once more. It wasn't the first time James had exhibited obsessive behavior, but I had foolishly hoped that by cutting ties and moving away, I would be safe. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how naive I had been. The breakup, which I had thought would be my clean break from the past, had done nothing to sever the hold he still had over me. Now, I was left wondering how deep his obsession ran, and how far he was willing to go. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself that I was overreacting. Maybe it was just an attempt to get closure, but deep down I knew better. James didn't ask for closure. James was controlling, and if he couldn't have me, he wanted to make sure no one else could. He had always been manipulative, and I knew he was capable of going to extreme lengths to get what he wanted. His possessiveness had always been a major red flag in our relationship, but back then I had overlooked it. Now I saw it for what it truly was, an obsessive, dangerous fixation. The messages didn't stop. They came in waves, each one more intrusive than the last. "I'm outside your work," one read. "I saw you walking into that coffee shop today. You looked so beautiful. Why don't you come talk to me?" I could feel his eyes on me, even though I didn't know where he was or how he was tracking me. It was a kind of paranoia that gripped me, a feeling that I was being watched every time I left my apartment, every time I went to work. I began to see shadows in places I had once considered safe. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was right behind me, hiding in plain sight. Then came the phone calls. At first, they were just hang-ups. I'd pick up the phone only to hear the sound of heavy breathing on the other end. It was unnerving to say the least, but it escalated quickly. One afternoon, I picked up my phone and heard his voice, as calm as ever, as if nothing had changed. "I know you don't want to talk to me, but I'm not going anywhere. We're meant to be together, and I won't stop until I'm with you." I hung up immediately, but the damage had already been done. The constant intrusion of his presence in my life had triggered something inside me. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't let him have that kind of control over me anymore. It was time to take action. I wasn't going to be a victim of his obsession. I had worked too hard to build my life back up after the breakup, and I wasn't about to let him destroy it. The first step was to block him. I blocked his number, deleted every message, and took his contact off my social media. I changed my settings on every account I had, restricting access to anyone who might try to find me. It was a small but necessary step in regaining control, but I knew blocking him wasn't enough. He was persistent, and he would find another way to contact me. That was his pattern. The problem was deeper than I had realized. That night, I took the next step and filed a report with the police. It was hard, admitting to myself that this was more than a bad breakup, more than a case of unrequited love. This was stalking. It was harassment. I was afraid for my safety. But when the officer I spoke with told me that the situation I was describing was much more common than I realized, it struck me. This was real. This wasn't some overreaction on my part. This was happening. The police told me they would keep an eye out, but they needed more evidence. More than just text messages, more than a few phone calls. It was frustrating. I knew they couldn't just act on a hunch, but I didn't want to wait around for something more serious to happen. I knew it was only a matter of time before James crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. So I took matters into my own hands. I began documenting everything, every message, every phone call, every time I thought I saw him lurking nearby. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, and I started paying attention to the small details that could help me build a case. I reached out to my friends, letting them know what was happening, asking them to keep an eye out to report anything unusual they saw. I changed my routine. I stopped walking the same routes. I took different paths to work. I even changed my schedule. But despite everything, the fear never quite left me. I couldn't escape the feeling that he was always one step ahead. The messages, the calls, the subtle reminders that he knew where I was, it all built up to a suffocating pressure that never stopped. And then came the day I saw him. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was walking to my car when I saw a figure standing by the street corner just beyond the trees. The instant my eyes landed on him, I froze. There was no mistaking that face. It was James. My heart raced and I quickly ducked behind a nearby pillar, hoping he hadn't seen me. I couldn't tell if he recognized me, but I wasn't about to take the chance. I waited, watching from the shadows until he eventually walked away. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. The weight of the past, the constant fear, the dread, it all came rushing back. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't live like this anymore. The next morning, I went to the police again, this time with the evidence I had gathered, the texts, the phone records, the photos of him I had taken when I saw him on the street. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get their attention. The officer told me they would issue a restraining order and start an investigation. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But that was just the beginning. The real battle was just starting, and I knew that the road ahead would be long, dangerous, and uncertain. I couldn't let my guard down. I had to stay vigilant. This time, though, I was ready. This time, I wasn't alone, and I would do whatever it took to protect myself and make sure he never had the power to control me again. In the weeks that followed, I found myself living in a constant state of hyper-alertness. I couldn't relax, couldn't even leave my apartment without scanning my surroundings, checking every shadow, every movement. It was like living in a world where I couldn't trust anything, least of all my own sense of security. The restraining order had been issued, and the police assured me they were investigating, but the sense of dread didn't leave. I wanted to believe that the legal action would be enough, that the evidence I had gathered, his messages, phone calls, the photos I had taken, would be enough to stop James. But it was. He was still out there, still watching, still lurking in the corners of my life. I had been given a sense of relief after the police issued the restraining order, but the fear continued to grow. The truth was, I didn't know who James was anymore. The man I had known had been manipulative, yes, but he hadn't been dangerous, not in the way he was now. This version of James was obsessed, unpredictable, Someone who could no longer be reasoned with, who didn't care about boundaries or respect. The first few days after the restraining order were oddly quiet. I was almost convinced that maybe he had finally given up. Maybe he was finally taking the hint. But then came the phone call. It was the middle of the night. I had just fallen into a restless sleep, my body still tense, still braced for anything to happen. And then my phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the silence like a knife. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing as I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. For a second I froze, the air thick with the suffocating weight of the moment. I didn't want to pick up. I didn't want to hear his voice again. But I had no choice. I knew it was him. I had to confront this head on, or else I would live the rest of my life in fear, always wondering when the next call, the next message would come. I answered, my voice shaking but determined. James. There was a long pause on the other end. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, like someone standing just out of sight, watching, waiting. Finally, his voice broke through the quiet, and it was as if no time had passed at all. The calm, eerily soothing tone that used to make me feel safe, but now made my blood run cold. You think you can hide from me, James said, the words dripping with the same control, the same possessiveness he always had. I've been keeping an eye on you. You can't keep running forever, you know. I know where you live, where you work. I'm always watching, and I'll be here when you're ready to come back. I felt a wave of nausea hit me, but I forced myself to respond. I'm done, James. This isn't going to work. You need to leave me alone. His laugh was low, almost mocking. You think I don't know how to get to you? You think a piece of paper, he scoffed, is going to stop me? I wanted to hang up, to slam the phone down and block his number, but I couldn't move. The words he was saying, the way he spoke as if I was still his possession, it made my skin crawl. I've changed, you know, he continued, his voice softening. I know I made mistakes, but I'm different now. We can make it work. We can be together again. You just have to stop running from what we are. His words were like poison slipping into my mind, trying to worm their way back into my heart. It was the same thing he had always done, gaslighting me, making me feel like I was the one at fault, the one running from something that was meant to be. I had heard it all before, but this time it felt different. There was no love in his words. There was no remorse. There was only a need for control, for domination. I finally found my voice despite the fear clawing at my throat. No, James, I'm not coming back. You're sick. This isn't love, it's obsession, it's harassment, and it ends now. The line went silent again. For a moment I thought he had hung up, but then his voice came through, quieter, almost with an edge of something darker. You're wrong. You'll see. You can't escape me. I could hear the finality in his tone. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. And the fear that had been gnawing at me for weeks solidified into something more real, more tangible. He wasn't going to stop. He couldn't stop. I hung up, my hands shaking, my heart racing in my chest. The reality of the situation hit me all over again. This wasn't just an ex trying to win me back. This was a man who couldn't let go, a man who didn't respect boundaries, didn't understand the concept of no. He didn't care that I had moved on, that I had built a life without him. All he cared about was his control over me, and if that meant stalking me, threatening me, or worse, he was willing to do whatever it took. The police had told me to document everything, to keep track of his actions, to report every call, every message. I had done that, but I realized now that I needed to do more. I needed to be proactive. If I didn't take control, if I didn't protect myself, he would continue to manipulate the situation until I was powerless. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. I knew I needed legal protection, but I also needed to understand how far James could push me before I could take stronger action. The lawyer was sympathetic, but realistic. She explained my options, including filing for a stronger form of protection, such as a more extensive restraining order that would involve criminal penalties if violated. I also made sure to take every precaution. I set up security cameras around my apartment, updated my phone settings, and locked down my social media profiles. I let my friends and coworkers know about the situation, asking them to be vigilant. I was determined not to let him creep into my life unnoticed again. But as much as I did to shield myself, the lingering fear remained. What if he escalated? What if the stalking turned violent? I had no answers, just a gnawing feeling that James wouldn't stop until he had broken through every defense I put up. It was on a rainy Thursday evening when I got the call. It wasn't from James, but from the police. They told me that they had tracked down a lead on him, that they had found a location where he had been hiding out. It wasn't much, but it was something. They wanted me to meet with them. The dread that had been hanging over me for weeks hit me like a wave. There was no turning back now. This was going to get worse before it got better. I had no idea what the police had found or what James was planning next. But I knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just about getting my ex out of my life. It was about survival. When I met the officer at the station, they told me they had discovered a series of hidden accounts tied to James's name. They were linked to more than just personal finances. There were names, dates, and a disturbing list of people who had been involved in similar situations. This wasn't just about me. James had been stalking other women, tracking them down, making them afraid to live their lives freely. The officer looked at me seriously. "We think he might be part of a bigger network," they said grimly. "This might be worse than you thought." I felt the world shift under my feet. This wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore. This was something much darker, a network of obsession and control that spanned far beyond anything I could have imagined. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let him, or anyone, take control of my life again. I had always believed that life would move forward, that the people I left behind would remain where they belonged in the past. But here I was, months after my breakup with James, dragged back into his world by the web of obsession he had woven around me. No matter how hard I tried to escape, no matter how many layers of protection I put between us, James was relentless. The discovery by the police had shaken me to my core. A bigger network. What did that even mean? I had never considered that James might be part of something far more dangerous than a single, obsessive ex. My mind swirled with the implications of what they had found. Hidden accounts, names, a pattern of behavior. It wasn't just me James had targeted. He had been manipulating, controlling, and stalking other women for years. And now, the police were hinting that he wasn't working alone. He was part of something darker, a collective of individuals who thrived on power, fear, and control. The idea of it was suffocating, and the worst part, I was entangled in it. Over the next few days, I did everything I could to stay out of James's reach. The police had assured me that they were following up on the leads, that they were working to track him down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. I was too exposed, too vulnerable. Each morning as I left my apartment, I found myself scanning the streets, checking behind corners, watching for any sign of movement. I had become obsessed with the idea that someone might be following me. Every car that passed, every footstep behind me made my heart race. It wasn't just James I feared anymore. It was whoever else he might be working with. The deeper I dug into what the police had uncovered, the more terrifying it became. If this network went beyond just James, if it truly involved more people, then my safety wasn't guaranteed. The stakes had risen in a way I could never have anticipated. A week after the police had contacted me about James's connections, I received another message. I was sitting at my desk at work when the phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another spam email or some forgotten notification, but it was a text. "Don't you see, you can't hide from the truth. I will find you." My breath caught in my throat. The words were unmistakable. It was James. I quickly checked the number. It was from an unknown one as expected. But there was something about this message that unsettled me more than the others. He wasn't just stalking me anymore. He was toying with me. He was trying to get inside my head again, trying to remind me of his control, of his power over me. I stared at the message for a long time, my mind spinning. I had blocked him from my phone months ago. I had changed all my numbers, updated my social media settings, and even gone so far as to install a new email address, one he wouldn't be able to trace. So how was he contacting me again? Suddenly, everything felt like it was closing in on me. How had he found me? How was he able to bypass the security I had carefully put in place? My thoughts raced, my heart hammering in my chest as I glanced around the office. Was he here, watching me? Was someone else involved, someone I didn't know about yet? I wasn't safe anymore. I could feel it. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. I knew I couldn't let the fear take over. I had dealt with James's manipulation before. I had been strong enough to walk away from him. But this was different. His fixation had grown, and I didn't understand the depths of it. The idea that I wasn't just dealing with him, but with a network of people who knew everything about me, who had been tracking my every move, sent a chill through my bones. I wasn't just running from one person anymore. I was running from a shadow that had followed me, wormed its way into every corner of my life, and had now started to choke the very air I breathed. I picked up the phone and called the police again. This time, I wasn't calm. I was frantic, my voice trembling with the anxiety that had settled into my chest. "He's here," I said, almost whispering the words into the phone. "He found me. He's contacting me again, but I don't understand how. He's bypassing everything I've set up. I need to know what's happening." The officer on the other end of the line tried to reassure me, but I could hear the urgency in his voice as well. They'd been trying to trace James's movements, but so far, he had been elusive. He was good at covering his tracks, too good. And now, with the added complexity of the network he was part of, the investigation had become more complicated. "I'm telling you," I said, voice rising with panic. "He's not alone anymore. This isn't just about him. He's part of something bigger, something that goes beyond just me. I don't know who else is involved, but I need help. Real help, not just a restraining order." The officer's voice was firm now, as if realizing the gravity of the situation. "We're escalating this. We'll get the team together and start gathering more intel. But right now, I need you to stay calm. Keep documenting everything. Don't engage with him and don't give him any reason to think he has power over you. We'll take it from here." "Don't engage," I repeated. "What if he comes after me again? What if he shows up at my apartment?" "We'll be monitoring his movements. Just stay put. We'll let you know when we have more information. For now, don't leave the apartment unless it's absolutely necessary." I ended the call, my mind reeling. The police were doing their best, but I was starting to wonder if even they could stop James, or whoever he was working with, from getting to me. The more I thought about the scope of the collective and its potential reach, the more powerless I felt. I stayed home the next few days, canceling all my plans, not answering emails and avoiding any unnecessary trips outside. I even turned down my friends when they offered to hang out. The more I isolated myself, the safer I felt. But the unease never left. The fear lingered in every corner of my apartment, in every breath I took. And then a few days later, I received another text. This one wasn't from James. It was different. The message came from another unknown number, but this time it was cryptic. "It's time you learn the truth." I froze, my hands going cold. I didn't know who had sent it. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew one thing for sure. James wasn't the only one watching me anymore. The walls were closing in, and I had no idea who was behind this new threat. But it was clear now. The collective was no longer just an abstract idea. They were real, and they were coming for me. The days following the cryptic message felt like a blur of tension, confusion, and fear. I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that I was being pulled into something I didn't understand, something far beyond my control. Each time I thought I was safe, each time I tried to convince myself that I had done everything I could to protect myself, something new would emerge. A new message, a new phone call, another strange encounter. I had never felt more exposed in my life. The cryptic message from the unknown number, "It's time you learn the truth," sent my mind spinning. Who could it be? Was it James again, trying to manipulate me into thinking he had a higher purpose? Or was it someone else, someone connected to the collective, the network of people I had come to believe were at the heart of this entire nightmare? I couldn't trust anything anymore. My whole reality had been turned upside down. The safety I thought I had regained, the life I had built for myself after everything with James had ended, was slipping through my fingers. I needed answers. I couldn't live like this in the dark with no sense of what was happening or who was pulling the strings. I had to find out who was behind all of this, who was watching me, controlling the situation, manipulating everything from the shadows. The police had told me they were following up on the leads they had, but I had come to realize that I could no longer rely solely on them. James had outsmarted them at every turn. He had managed to slip through their fingers before, and if the collective was really involved, then no one could be trusted. The idea of investigating this on my own terrified me, but I had no choice. I needed to know the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. I couldn't be a passive participant in this anymore. That afternoon, I sat down at my desk, staring at the message again. "It's time you learn the truth." I ran my fingers over the words, trying to make sense of them. Who would say that? What truth were they referring to? The vague, ominous nature of the message made it clear that whoever had sent it wanted me to question everything. My safety, my life, even my own perception of reality. But if I was going to uncover the truth, I had to start somewhere. I had to take control of the situation. I began researching. I searched for any link between James, the collective, and any other people I thought might be connected to them. I spent hours combing through public records, social media, even old news stories, looking for any scrap of information that could give me some insight into what was really going on. The more I dug, the more I realized just how far-reaching this network was. It wasn't just about James. The collective was something global, something that spanned countries, industries, and governments. The web was enormous, and every thread I pulled revealed something darker, something more disturbing than I had imagined. I stumbled upon a name, Nathaniel Forsyth. He was listed as a major shareholder in several companies that were part of larger international operations, but his name kept popping up in connections to organizations that were far more sinister. Illegal arms dealing, money laundering, human trafficking. Every time I followed a trail, it seemed to lead back to him, or someone close to him. Nathaniel Forsyth was part of the collective. He was one of the key players, the kind of person who operated in the shadows, pulling the strings and making sure everything stayed hidden. But what did this have to do with me? What was my connection to someone like him? I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was right in front of me, but it was just out of reach. The more I uncovered, the more the pieces didn't fit together. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. I discovered a series of documents from a private firm that appeared to be working directly with the collective. It wasn't anything explicitly criminal, just vague references to high-level meetings, corporate mergers, and international operations. But hidden between the lines was something that made my heart stop. There, in black and white, was my name. Not just my name, but a file marked with a confidentiality clause detailing my personal history, my relationships, my family, my job, and most disturbingly, the details of my breakup with James. It was like they had been tracking me all along, keeping tabs on my every move. I felt a cold sweat break out over my body as I stared at the document. How could they have known? How did they have access to this information? The thought that the collective had been watching me all along, even before James started stalking me, was enough to send me into a panic. And then there it was, the explanation. A section of the document was marked with the heading, the targeted subject, former relationships with high-value assets. Below that was a list of names including James. They weren't just watching me because of James. They were watching me because I was connected to him, and now I was a part of whatever game the collective was playing. I wasn't just a random victim. I had been targeted as part of a much larger scheme, something that had to do with James's involvement in this dangerous network. The realization hit me like a freight train. I wasn't just an ex-girlfriend caught in the crossfire. I was being used as a pawn in something far bigger than I could understand. My life, my safety, everything I had fought for, it had all been manipulated, twisted, and used for some greater purpose. I didn't know what the collective wanted from me, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't wait around for them to make their next move. I had to confront this head-on. The next step was clear. I needed to find Nathaniel Forsyth, figure out how he was connected to me, and, if possible, use that information to stop the collective from coming any closer. I couldn't do it alone, though. It was too dangerous. So I reached out to someone I trusted, a close friend from my past who had connections in high places. He was a journalist, someone who had worked on stories about corruption and power before, and I knew he would understand the gravity of the situation. If anyone could help me dig deeper into the collective, it was him. "I don't know what you're getting into, but I'll help," he told me after I explained the situation. "We'll find the truth together." But even as I sought help, I knew I was in a race against time. The collective was already moving, already pulling the strings in my life. And if they knew I was coming for them, if they realized I was close to uncovering their secrets, they wouldn't hesitate to silence me before I could expose them. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I was no longer just a victim. I was a fighter, and I was going to take down the people who had been watching me, controlling me, and manipulating me for far too long. The tension in the air was suffocating. Every passing moment felt like it could be my last. Every breath felt heavier, as if the walls of my apartment were slowly closing in on me. But I knew there was no turning back now. The truth was no longer some distant idea or theory. It was right in front of me, an unshakable reality that I had no choice but to confront. Nathaniel Forsyth, the man whose name I had found in the documents, the man who was at the heart of the collective, and whose involvement in my life, in James's obsession, was clearer than ever. I still didn't know exactly how he fit into this dark, labyrinthine network, but one thing was painfully obvious. The collective was watching me, and they would stop at nothing to silence anyone who threatened to expose them. I had already taken too many steps forward to pull back now. The pieces had fallen into place. This wasn't just about James anymore. It never had been. This was about power, control, a network so deep and vast that it had the ability to manipulate entire systems, lives, and governments, and I was part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. I couldn't stay hidden forever. No matter how many locks I put on the door or how many precautions I took, I knew the collective wouldn't stop until they controlled me again, until I became just another pawn in their game. I had to make the next move. I met with my journalist friend, Mark, the one person I trusted with everything I had uncovered. He was skeptical at first, his usual demeanor cautious, but when I showed him the files, the evidence, and connected the dots, the skepticism melted away. He understood then. He knew the danger we were in. "We need to expose them," he said, his voice low, serious. "You're right. The collective is massive. If we bring this to light, it's not just going to be a local story. This could go international. We need to make sure we have everything ready before we go public. You can't just take them on without the proper ammo." Mark wasn't wrong. We had to be careful. One wrong move, one slip-up, and we could be erased before we even had a chance to act. But I had already made up my mind. If I was going to go down, I was going to take them with me. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. We spent the next few days compiling every piece of evidence I had gathered. Messages, phone records, the documents from the private firm, the link to Nathaniel Forsyth, everything. Mark's team of contacts helped us trace the digital footprints, track the money laundering schemes, and uncover the network of people behind the collective. Every new piece of information was another confirmation of what I had suspected. The collective was more than just a crime syndicate. They were an institution, operating in the shadows, pulling the strings on a global scale. They had a plan, a vision for control, and no one, not even me, was supposed to uncover it. With Mark's help, we made contact with a handful of trustworthy journalists who had experience with high-stakes exposés. We knew that releasing this information needed to be a coordinated effort. It wasn't just about publishing one article. It was about ensuring the entire world would see it. The corruption, the human trafficking, the illegal arms deals, all of it needed to be exposed to the light of day. But as the plan began to come together, I felt the pressure building. The collective wasn't going to let us do this without a fight. Every move I made felt like it was being watched. Every text I sent, every email I wrote, had the weight of 1,000 eyes on me. They were closing in. And then it happened. The night before the big reveal, the night before we were supposed to drop the bombshell, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment I thought I was imagining things, my mind playing tricks on me. But no, this was real. My hands shook as I answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was low, almost sinister. "You're getting too close," James said, his voice dripping with menace. "I warned you, you should have listened to me." I could hear the sound of static in the background, like he was in some kind of open space, but it was his words that cut through the noise. "You think you can just expose us," he continued. "Do you know who you're dealing with? You have no idea what's coming for you. We'll erase everything, your past, your present, your future. You'll be nothing, just like everyone else who's crossed us." My stomach twisted into knots. He wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was speaking for the collective. This was it. The line in the sand had been drawn. There was no going back. "James, I'm not afraid of you anymore," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "And I'm not afraid of the collective. This ends now." He laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. "You think you're in control. You think you're the one calling the shots. You'll regret this, I promise you." Before I could respond, the line went dead. My heart was pounding in my chest and my hands were sweating, but I didn't back down. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. Not anymore. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating incessantly. I had a dozen missed calls, a flood of messages, and several notifications from the journalists I had been in contact with. They were ready to go. The article was published. The information was out there, and it was the most explosive piece of journalism the world had seen in years. The collective's secret network had been exposed. From illegal arms deals to money laundering, human trafficking, and the exploitation of vulnerable individuals around the world, the truth was laid bare for the entire world to see. Every name, every shady deal, every corrupt individual was now out in the open. But as expected, the collective didn't just sit back and let it happen. They fought back, using every resource at their disposal. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, messages, and panic. The police were involved. Mark's team of contacts were under fire, and every step I took felt like I was being hunted. But then something unexpected happened. The people who had been a part of the collective, the ones who had helped us bring the truth to light, started coming forward. Whistleblowers. They were finally ready to expose the full extent of the collective's power, to testify against them, to help bring them down once and for all. The walls of the collective's empire began to crumble. The global power they had wielded so silently, so effectively, was collapsing. James and Nathaniel Forsyth were only the beginning. There were other players, other figures in the network who were now being investigated, arrested, and charged. I knew that even though the truth had been exposed, the fight wasn't over. There would be repercussions. There would be retaliation. The collective wouldn't go down without a fight. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control, a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. I had faced my greatest fear. I had stood up to the dark forces that had controlled me for so long, and I had exposed them for what they truly were. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was free. And now, with the world finally beginning to see the truth, there was nothing left standing between me and my future. The nightmare was over,